It is on the strength of his creative power, his prerogative as creator of all things, that he automatically becomes Father. So without him, nothing exists. Nothing is sustained without him. Even the devil is in existence because of God. That is how powerful and boisterous this revelation of God as Father is. He's the sustainer. He's the foundation of all things. If you come to the New Testament, you find the word pater. It goes beyond being foundation. He becomes nourisher. So the one that brings sustenance to realities is still God. Now, because he's Father, there are certain things you enjoy, not because you are doing anything, but because fatherhood places an obligation on him. That's why the Bible said the rain and the sun are available both to the good and to the evil. So even the man who is evil enjoys certain benevolences of God because God is Father, not because of him. So God will allow the rain to water his crops so that he doesn't die of starvation. He can draw that energy from his farm produce and go and do wickedness. But God is Father. And because he's Father, he will be hoping that this person will repent. But while he's yet awaiting that encounter, God will still be sustaining him because he's Father. That's a generalized dimension. Now, if you go a bit further, you will still discover that beyond fatherhood, God is king. Because of his nature and his essence, he's a monarch. The power, the realm where he operates is guarded with too much authority. So everything God says becomes law. So he doesn't even need a crown or a scepter to be a king. He operates in an energy level that is superior and superlative. So even if God were to crack a joke, it will become a law. So he creates a dominion that is regulated by his character and his nature. And his nature and character is transmitted through his words or his laws. So he's king. That is also generalized because you don't have to know God to be controlled by the power of gravity. He weaved it into nature. You don't need to know God. If you live in evil, there is something he planted in you called the conscience. Even if you don't meet Christ, if you allow your conscience to die, on the last day you will be judged. You appear before a great white throne, Revelation 20 from verse 10 to 15, and you will be judged. And you'll be asking yourself, who did I sin against? I don't know you. He put a conscience in you as a checker. And because he is king, he has authority over creation. That is why God can be offended at you when you sin. Because he is king. Are you seeing that? You don't need to be a Christian. There is a law that regulates every creation because of his kingship. Now, when you walk with God closer, you will now come to another level where you discover he's not just king, but he's Lord. As Lord, he does not just exert authority. He is the owner. He's the owner of all things. So anybody who meets God as Father can decide to exploit his benevolence and not have a relationship with him. But the obligation that is placed on him will still compel him to be benevolently disposed towards that person. Anybody who meets God as a king can apply the laws of God and succeed. Like you see people, the people of the world today succeeding because they have mastered the laws that God put in creation. In fact, Jesus speaking, he said the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of the kingdom because they have understood the principles and the laws of God and they are applying it more effectively than those of us who are even in the kingdom. And they are making progress by those laws, yet they don't have a relationship with God. Not moral laws now, but universal laws. Are you seeing that? But anybody who encounters God as Lord must have a relationship. You will have to make yourself his property for him to be your Lord. Because Lord means master. It means owner. Now, there are generalized realities available to those who encounter him as Father. There are generalized realities available to those who encounter him as King. But there are certain personalized realities that are not available to those people. They are only available to those who call him Lord. This one now is like God being biased. Because this particular set of people, he didn't just create them. They have decided to come into a relationship with him. So they've submitted their lives to him. They don't live for themselves. They live to fulfill the interest of God. And so the jealousy of God is invested in them to ensure that their life of necessity must be successful. One of those personalized realities that God has made available to those who acknowledge him as Lord is what we call grace. Grace is not a resource for the whole world. And this is why when you are talking from the economy of grace, the people of the world who cannot know this, they will think it's foolishness. For example, you are going for an interview. All of you graduated from the university. All of you have experiences. But you want to go for that interview, you dump your certificate and you start praying in tongues. And you pray in tongues for 3 hours. And you go for that interview. While somebody else is coming with the assurance that he schooled in Harvard. Although you schooled in Harvard, but you are trusting God to give you an advantage. Now, when that person sees you, he will say, you are foolish. What are you doing? You are just a religious by God. Because he doesn't know the possibilities of grace. He has not encountered him as Lord. But you see, when grace begins to manifest its excellency, it will now begin to exhort you beyond the things that you have and others have. And so they will now look at you, although both of you have the same qualifications, but the outcome of your life surpasses everything they can imagine. And then they are even working harder than you, but they can't explain why your life is full of so much glory. They can't explain why things work for you with so much ease. In fact, if they are put in the same situation with you, where the energy of the flesh fails, they are hopeless, but you are not hopeless. And they don't know why, even though the situation is such that everybody should perish, you come out. You know, Paul was in a situation of a shipwreck. They were without food for 14 days. And it became obvious that they were finished. And suddenly Paul stands up. There are experienced navigators, experienced sailors there. Paul, who was a novice as touching matters of navigation, now began to address them. In that situation, you are supposed to keep quiet so that the experts will talk. But you see, the expert knows so much. There is a realm they don't know. When it becomes hopeless, then the technology of grace switches on. And so when 14 days passed and they didn't know what to do, and it was obvious they were going to die, in fact, they began to contemplate to kill all the prisoners. And Paul said, fear not. No, it's not that kind of situation. You can't come and say fear not, because they will ask you, who are you? Which school did you go to? Do you know what is going on here? Can you interpret the waves? Can you tell the condition of the engine? There is a realm beyond the waves and the engine. It's the realm of grace. Fear not. He said, my God, whose I am and whom I serve, he said, stood by me last night, and he said, there shall be no loss of life. Immediately the captain, having experienced one or two things with Paul, he knows that when this man talk, it may not be logical, but obey him. Because it's a technology. I don't know it, but it's at work here. When this man speaks, it happens, so hear him. And because of Paul's utterance, they didn't kill anybody, they waited. The ship broke down, but everybody was saved according to the speakings of Paul. In fact, when they got to the island, in order to further showcase the excellency of grace, the fire they prepared in order to warm themselves, a viper came out and beat Paul. The people in the land who were not on the ship. You know, in that situation, only those on the ship will understand something happening in the life of Paul. God wanted it to be general. So those who were not on the ship saw that, they say, Kai, this is a bad man. Even though he escaped the wave, he said his faith has caught up with him. This is karma. This is karma. But you see, when we are operating by grace, there's nothing like karma. Even where we make mistakes, is written off, is exonerated. It says, as the north is farther away from the south, it says, so have I deleted your iniquity. So God is not telling you to sin, but in the areas where you sin, grace still has something sufficient to exonerate you from the judgment. So karma doesn't exist in our realm. And Paul just waved it, threw it in the fire, and continued. They were watching, and the experts showed up again. They say, he will swell up now. In 5 minutes, he will start vomiting blood. They waited. They didn't know that in grace there's such a thing as you shall tread upon scorpions and serpents, and they shall by no means hurt you. They didn't know that because it's not in the syllabus of the ones they studied in their schools. And when they waited and waited and waited, and the man was not dying, they now came to him and said, who are you? Somebody will have to reintroduce himself.